So recall that two lines that are parallel are parallel because they have the same slope. They have the same slope. Graphically, when you look at them, they're going to look like this. There'll be two lines that never intersect. So an example of parallel lines would be slopes with lines both of 2. So if the slope of line 1 was 2 and the slope of line 2 was 2, then they're parallel. Perpendicular lines have the mathematical definition that their slopes are negative reciprocals. That's the mathematical definition of their slopes. We also need to remember that perpendicular lines meet at a 90-degree angle. So to give you an example of perpendicular lines, visibly, they're going to be two lines that look like this, so that this angle is 90 degrees. But if one slope is -3, then the slope that is perpendicular to that, this symbol, remember, means perpendicular, we're going to make -3 into a fraction, and then we flip it and switch it. So it'd be a positive 1/3. We could also say that 2/5 is perpendicular to -5/2. So if you're asked to identify if these lines are parallel or perpendicular, well, all you have to look at is you look at the slope. The slope, recall, is the number here in front of x. So if we look at these slopes, well, one of them is positive 1/3. The other one is -3. If I make that into a fraction, it'd be -3/1. And notice if you take 1/3 and you flip it and switch it, you're going to get -3/1. So these two lines are perpendicular. So given 2 points, you've got to identify if the lines are parallel or perpendicular. Recall your slope formula is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So let's first identify our points. So we have x1, y1, we have x2, y2. So if we go ahead and plug in our numbers there, we'll do this in green. It says y2, which is 6, minus y1, which is 7, over x2, which is 1, minus y2, which is 3. 6 minus 7 is going to give us -1 on top. 1 minus 3 is -2 on bottom. And a -1 over a -2 is a positive 1/2. I'm going to do the same thing for my next one. So I have, again, y2 minus y1 equals x2 minus x1. So first of all, I'm going to label my points. So I have x1, y1, and x2, y2. So if I fill in my numbers, I'll have y2, which is 3, minus y1, which is 4, over x2, which is -4, minus x1, which is -2. 3 minus 4 is -1. And when I have that minus negative, remember that's the same thing as saying plus a positive, and -4 plus 2 is -2. -1 over -2 is a positive 1/2. So notice that your slopes, both of them had a slope of 1/2 since they were the same. That told us that these two lines are parallel. So for this one, we had to find the slope, but we've got to solve these equations for y. So we have 4x plus 3y equals 12, and -4x equals -3x plus 16. So we're going to focus on 4x plus 3y equals 12 right now. So if I'm going to solve this, I've got to solve this for y, which means I want y's on one side and I want everything else on the other. So the thing that's on the wrong side of the line is this 4x, because this 4x doesn't have a y with it. So I'm going to minus 4x from both sides. So I get 3y equals 12 minus 4x. Then to get y completely by itself, I have to get rid of that 3. To get rid of it, I divide everything by 3. So I end up with y equals 12 over 3 is 4 minus 4/3 x. So now I have to solve my second equation for y. So I'm going to draw my line, label my sides. Y is on one side, everything else on the other. This I don't have to do quite as much work because the only thing keeping y from being alone is that -4. And to get rid of it, I divide everything by negative 4. So I get y equals a negative negative gives us a positive 3 over 4x. And 16 divided by negative 4 is negative 4. So I have two slopes. I have a slope of negative 4/3 and a slope of positive 3/4. We've got to compare these two. So negative 4/3 and positive 3 over 4, well, clearly they're not the same. So if you look at them, if you take negative 4/3 and you flip it and you switch the sign, you're going to get positive 3/4. So that tells us that these two lines are perpendicular. So the next question asks us to write the equation of a parallel line to a line that's parallel to 3x plus 5y equals 15 and through the point negative 10, 2. So the first thing we've got to do is we've got to solve this equation for y. So I'm going to draw my line, label my sides. So I need to get rid of this 3x, so I'm going to minus 3x first. So I have 5y equals 15 minus 3x. To get y completely by itself, we're going to divide everything by 5. And I get that y equals 3 minus 3/5 x. So the reason we had to solve this first is because in order to figure out this new equation, we know that the new line had to be parallel to this line. But we had to find the slope of this line first. So the slope of this line is going to be negative 3/5, which means that the slope of our new line is also negative 3/5. And we know that this goes through the point negative 10, 2. So for this particular problem, I'm going to use my point slope formula, which if you'll recall is y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. And we've got to fill in numbers for y1, m, and x1. So my m is easy. That's negative 3 over 5. My y1 comes from my point here, and it's the 2, but in the formula, remember, it switches signs, so it'll be a negative 2. And my x1 is the x value in that point, which in this case was negative 10. It's going to switch signs, and it's going to become positive 10. Now I get to distribute and simplify. So I'm going to distribute negative 3/5 in here. So I still have y minus 2 on the left. Draw my line. Equals negative 3 over 5x. And negative 3 over 5 times a positive 10 is actually going to give us a negative 6. And then my final step to get y by itself is to add 2 to both sides. When I add 2 to the right side, I have to add it to the 6 because the negative 3 over 5 has an x with it. So I end up with y equals negative 3 over 5 x minus 4 because negative 6 plus 2 is minus 4. And lastly, we need to write the equation of the line perpendicular to 2x minus 5y equals 10 and through the point 4, negative 1. So first things first, we need to solve this equation for y because we've got to figure out what the slope of this line is right now. So we need y's on one side and everything else on the other. So to get y by itself, we're going to minus 2x from both sides. So we have negative 5y equals 10 minus 2x. And then our final step to get y by itself is divide everything by negative 5. So our equation of our line ends up being y equals negative 2 plus 2 over 5x. So the slope of this line is positive 2 over 5, which tells us that the slope of our new line is actually going to be negative 5 over 2, because remember they're perpendicular, so we have to flip it, and we've got to switch it. And then we also know that it goes through the point 4, negative 1. So for this problem, I'm just going to use the equation y equals mx plus b, and I'm going to plug it in and solve for b, and then we'll get our equation that way. So I know that y in this case is negative 1. I know that m is negative 5 over 2, and I know that x is positive 4 plus b. So I've got to work this out. So I have negative 1 on the left. If I distribute negative 5 over 2 times 4 is going to give me negative 10 plus b. To get b by itself, I'm going to add 10 to both sides, and I get that b equals positive 9. So this tells me that my equation of my line, which is supposed to be in y equals mx plus b form, we've already found the slope, which we know to be negative 5 over 2, and we just identified that our b was 9. So this would be my equation, y equals negative 5 over 2x plus 9. Remember that horizontal lines are lines that are drawn this direction. So imagine on a graph where you had an x and a y axis. That horizontal line is only going to touch the y-axis at some point, so its equation is always y equals some number. So if you were given a point of 3, 5, and you wanted the horizontal line that went through that point, it's really easy. You look at the y value. Whatever the y value is tells you what that equation is. It would be y equals 5. And a vertical line is a line that is straight up and down. So imagine if you drew your x and your y-axis. That vertical line is always going to touch the x-axis at some point. So its equation is going to be x equals some number. So if you had a point, say negative 2, 5, and they wanted the line that was vertical, and through that point, it's really easy because your x value here is negative 2, so your equation is x equals negative 2. Now, suppose that you were asked to write the equation of a line that was perpendicular to the y-axis and through negative 3, 5. So first of all, let's draw a graph. This is the x-axis, this is the y-axis. If I want it perpendicular to the y-axis, I have two options. I could draw this purple line, or I could draw this blue line. Only one of those, however, is perpendicular. So the purple line is parallel because it never touches the y-axis, so that's not the one we want. So we really want this blue line here. It's horizontal, so that means its equation is going to be y equals some number, and the point that it went through was the point negative 3, 5, so its equation is going to be y equals 5. And that would be our answer.